The wind howls 400 feet above the Nebraska dirt. My harness groans while I check the cold steel carabiners. My brother framed me for drug dealing. My parents took his side, saying he can't risk his career, and a record won't hurt me. So I took brutal revenge. Below me, my supervisor Valdez stands by the trailer. He looks small and gray. Something is wrong with the morning light. Valdez signals for a fast descent. My boots hit the gravel with a heavy thud. He does not offer a handshake or a nod. Compliance is on the speakerphone inside the staging yard office. A woman's voice sounds like sharpened glass over the line. She mentions an anonymous report of impaired behavior during my last climb. Every word is a calculated strike. I see Valdez grip his clipboard like a weapon. The company driver takes me to the clinic in a white sedan. We pass beige suburbs and Mandeville lawns. I calculate the cost of this silence in my head. A single positive test means I am blacklisted from every tower in the country. $68 an hour vanishes with one phone call. The nurse hands me a plastic cup. Her eyes are tired and cold. She expects me to fail. I return to the motel and find 23 missed calls. One text from my mother stops my heart. She says they can explain everything. That means they already know. My truck was unlocked in the gated lot while Leo sat on my couch. He wanted to borrow it to move bridal shower gifts. I told him no. Now I realize he never wanted the keys. He only wanted the shadows. The family dinner feels like a funeral for a living man. My father sits with a yellow legal pad. Leo hunches over his phone with wet eyes. They admit the truth without any shame. Leo stashed the heat in my tool rack to avoid a search. He called the tip to force a distraction. They want me to confess to save his finance degree. My mother is already cleaning. I walk to the door and hear my father's final ultimatum. He says I am selfish for protecting my own life. They co-signed Leo's condo and tied their retirement to his lies. I look at the brother who tried to cage me. He looks pathetic. I do not argue or scream. I call a criminal lawyer before I reach my truck. The game has changed. I am not the spare son anymore. I drive away. Drive from the beige house while my knuckles turn white against the steering wheel. The silence of the Nebraska plains feels like a physical weight. My parents are willing to bury me alive to save a condo and a junior analyst position. I pull into a gravel lot and search for a lawyer. My thumb hovers over the screen until I find a name that sounds like a shield. I leave a message with a shaking hand. The sun, the setting behind a distant tower. The attorney calls back 20 minutes later with a voice like dry parchment. He does not ask about my feelings or the betrayal. He only asks if I have signed anything yet. I tell him no. He sends a digital retainer and warns me to stay away from the Silverado. Every word he speaks is a brick in a wall I am building. I pay the $2,500 without blinking. It is the cost of my freedom. I am officially a client. I return to the motel and lock the deadbolt with a sharp click. The air conditioning hums a low, lonely tune. I sit on the edge of the bed and wait for the other shoe to drop. My brother is a coward, but he is also desperate. Desperate people do not stop at one lie. I watch the door handle as if it might turn on its own. The shadows in the corner look like men. My phone vibrates against the nightstand. It is a knock, instead of a call that finally breaks the silence. I look through the tiny peephole and see blue uniforms. Two officers stand under the buzzing porch light with their hands near their belts. My heart hammers against my ribs like a trapped bird. I step outside and pull the door shut behind me. The older cop asks about the white truck in the lot. He says they received a tip about controlled substances. I feel the cold night air. I remember my lawyer's script and repeat the words exactly. I want my attorney present for any questioning. The younger officer looks annoyed and shifts his weight. They ask to search the Silverado without a warrant. I say no. The silence between us stretches until it snaps. They cannot force their way in without more evidence. The older cop sighs and tells me not to leave town. They walk back to their cruiser. I am still standing in the dark. I call the attorney to report the encounter. He sounds pleased but warns me that the escalation has begun. Leo is panicking because the company drug test did not lead to handcuffs. He is trying to force the police to find his stash before I can move the truck. I realize my brother wants me in a prison cell. It is not just about his career anymore. It is about my total destruction. I start typing my notes. Every detail matters now. The lab results arrive on Tuesday morning via a secure email link. I hold my breath until I see the word negative in bold print. I am clean across every panel. HR calls 10 minutes later to reactivate my credentials. The woman sounds different now. She warns me against retaliation, but confirms I have a spot on the Montana crew. I am back on the roster for Monday. My career is safe. The weight lifts, but the anger remains. It is cold. I sit on my balcony and watch the traffic flow toward downtown. I pull up the non-emergency number for the police department. It is time to provide the tip they actually need. I give them Leo's name and his silver Audi's plate number. I tell the dispatcher he admitted to stashing drugs in my vehicle. I explain the frame job and the family meeting. The typing on the other end is steady and rhythmic. I am no longer the victim. I am the witness. Officer Martinez calls 2 hours later to confirm a successful traffic stop. They found the distribution level quantities inside Leo's car during a Key 9 sweep. He is being transported for booking as we speak. My stomach ties itself in a knot that will not loosen. The prosecutor will need a formal statement about the family dinner. I agree to everything without hesitation. The rage finally breaks into a quiet, icy resolve. Open a soda and wait for my parents to arrive. The banging on my apartment door sounds like a rhythmic hammer against wood. Slept. I look through the glass lens and see my parents standing in the hallway. My mother's face is a ruined map of red blotches and streaks. My father looks ready to tear the hinges from the frame. I open the door just enough to let them rush inside. They do not ask how I am. They do not mention my job. My father demands to know what I have done to Leo. The air in the living room turns hot and thick with their panic. My mother grabs my forearm with fingers that feel like cold talons. She tells me that Leo was arrested during his commute to the office. The police found enough pills to destroy a dozen lives. She says there must be some terrible misunderstanding. I pull my arm back and stare at the wall. I tell them I made the call to protect myself. My father's face turns a dark shade of purple. My father steps into my personal space and points a finger at my chest. He demands that I go to the station and claim the drugs were mine. He says, I can tell the officers that I asked Leo to hold them. They have already done the math on the condo payments. If Leo goes to prison, their co-signed investment vanishes into the bank's vault. They are not here for Leo's soul. They are here for their own credit score. I laugh a dry sound that contains no humor or warmth. I ask them if they truly want me to confess to a felony. My mother starts to sob and sinks onto the edge of my couch. She says that I have always been the resilient son who handles things. Leo is soft and fragile, like a piece of expensive glass. I tell her that glass should not play with fire. My father tells me that I am dead to them now. The room falls into a heavy silence that rings in my ears. I tell them to get out of my apartment before I call the police again. My father looks at me like I am a total stranger. He has never seen me stand my ground like this. They move toward the door with slumped shoulders and heavy feet. My mother turns back to look at me one last time. She says she does not know who I am. I close the door. Over the next few weeks, I begin to systematically cut every wire. I remove them from my family phone plan and cancel the home security subscription. I call the utility company to transfer the electric bill back to their names. I do not send an email or make a phone call. I simply stop being their silent bank account. Each cancellation feels like a weight falling off my shoulders. I am finally becoming a ghost in their financial world. The prosecutor calls me to a small office with gray carpet. I provide the screenshots of the texts and the notes from my lawyer. He looks at the timeline and nods with a grim expression. The independent drug test from my company is the final nail in Leo's coffin. My brother's defense attorney tries to call me a vindictive liar. The evidence says otherwise. Leo takes a plea deal to avoid the worst of the prison time. He is now a felon. Leo's fiancée leaves him the day the news hits the local paper. She is already posting pictures with a man who has a clean record. My parents lose the condo to the bank within 60 days. They have to take a second mortgage on their own house to pay the lawyers. I hear these details through my aunt, who still calls me. She says they are struggling to buy groceries. I listen to the updates and feel nothing at all. 4 months later, they show up at my door in a beat-up car. They look 10 years older and smell like desperation. They need $47,000 to stop the foreclosure on their home. I walk to my desk and pull out my checkbook. I write a check for exactly $1 and hand it to them. I tell them it is for 18 years of room and board. My father rips it up. They finally realize I am gone. The shredded remains of my $1 check flutter to the floor like gray snow. My father's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. He looks at my clean apartment and the gear bags packed for Montana. He realizes that I am thriving while his golden son is rotting. I do not offer them a seat or a glass of water. I stand by the door with my hands in my pockets. I am waiting for the final exit. They are finished. My mother tries to push past my father to reach for my hand. She begs me to think of their future in a homeless shelter. She says that family should forgive even the darkest betrayals. I tell her that Leo did not just betray me, he tried to enslave me. If his plan had worked, I would be the one begging for mercy. She stops crying and stares at me with hollow eyes. She finally sees the wall I built. It is high. Harold speaks in a low voice that carries a jagged, desperate edge. He says they will tell everyone in town that I abandoned my elderly parents. He threatens to ruin my reputation, just as Leo tried to ruin my career. I remind him that I have the court transcripts and the recorded family meeting. I have the proof of their conspiracy to commit perjury. His threat dies in his throat like a trapped moth. He has no moves left to play. Leo stamped behind them and looks at the floorboards with a blank stare. He has lost the arrogance of the finance world and the fancy suits. He is just a man with a record and no prospects for the future. I wonder if he even feels the weight of the ruin he caused. He does not look at me or offer another apology. He is a shell of a person. I feel a strange sense of relief. It is over. I tell them to leave my home for the last time today. They file out into the hallway without another word or a backward glance. I close the door and engage every lock with a series of clicks. The silence that follows is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. I go to my kitchen and pour a glass of water. My heart rate is steady and my hands are perfectly still. I am free of their toxicity. That night I finish packing my climbing harness and my heavy work boots. I am leaving for a new site in the high mountains of Montana. The air there will be thin and cold and clean of their lies. I check my bank account and see the steady growth of my savings. I do not owe a single person a penny or a favor. My life is my own again. I feel like a man who survived a wreck. The next morning I drive my Silverado toward the state line as the sun rises. I pass the suburbs where I grew up and the beige houses I hated. I do not feel nostalgia or regret for the bridges I burned. I think about the towers waiting for me in the northern clouds. There is a peace in the labor that they could never understand. I turn up the radio and focus on the road ahead of me. My aunt, who still lives back in Nebraska, sends one final text while I am stopped at a gas station. She says, "My parents moved into a cramped, 2-bedroom unit near the hospital. My mother is working night shifts to keep the lights on in the dark. My father is doing manual labor for a local contractor. It is the kind of work he used to mock when I did it. The irony is a bitter pill they have to swallow." I delete the message. I reach the mountain base and look up at the steel structure. It pierces the gray sky like a needle of hope and hard work. My phone buzzes with a new number, but I do not answer the call. I block it immediately and walk toward the staging yard. My supervisor nods at me and hands me a fresh safety harness. He says we have a long day ahead of us. I smile. I am ready to climb. The cold Montana air bites at my skin as I hook into the first safety rail. I focus on the rhythmic click of my carabiners against the galvanized steel. This tower is a different beast than the Nebraska highways. It rises like a jagged bone against a bruised sky. Below me, the world shrinks into a silent map of pine trees and snow. I breathe in the thin oxygen and feel the weight of my secrets. I am finally above the reach of their hands. Midway up the climb, my radio crackles with an urgent message from Valdez. He tells me there is a visitor at the base of the tower. I look down and see a dark sedan parked near my Silverado. My heart rate spikes as I realize I did not change my emergency contact information. The company still has my mother's number on file for certain safety protocols. I wonder if they followed me across state lines. A shadow moves near the truck. It is not my mother. I descend with practiced speed, while the wind whistles through my helmet. My boots hit the frozen earth, and I see Leo standing by my tailgate. He looks smaller in the vast mountain landscape. He is wearing a thin jacket that offers no protection against the elements. He says he drove 10 hours to find me because the letters were returned. He looks like a ghost seeking a warm place to hide. I do not unhook my harness. I just stare at him. Leo tells me that the parents are being evicted from the apartment. They cannot handle the manual labor, and the hospital shifts are ending. He claims Harold has suffered a minor heart attack from the stress. I look at his face and search for the lie. It is hidden behind his tears and the shaking of his hands. He begs me for a place to stay just for a month. He says he will work as a laborer for my crew. It is a trap. I ask him why he thinks I would ever let him near my life again. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, crumpled envelope. It is a letter from our grandmother's estate lawyer that I never received. Apparently, there was a small trust fund intended for both of us. My parents have been intercepting the state and the statements for years to fund Leo's lifestyle. The power balance shifts as I realize they stole from me long before the drugs. I take the letter from his hand. The document proves that Harold and my mother spent over $50,000 of my inheritance. They used it to pay for Leo's private tutoring and his first BMW. My brother admits he knew about the money, but stayed silent. He thought they were just helping him get ahead in the finance world. I feel a new kind of coldness settle in my chest. It is not anger. It is a final, absolute clarity. Look at the mountains. I tell Leo to get back in his car and leave before I call the site security. He says he has nowhere else to go and no gas money for the return. I pull out a $20 bill and drop it on the frozen mud. I tell him to use it to find a shelter or a bus station. He looks at the money like it is a poison. He realizes that I will never be his savior again. He picks up the bill. The sedan pulls away and leaves a cloud of dust in the freezing air. I walk back to the tower base and signal to Valdez that I am clear. He asks if everything is okay with my family. I tell him that I don't have a family anymore. He nods and tells me to get back to work. I start the climb again, but my focus is different. I am thinking about the lawyer in Nebraska. I have one more case to file. The sun sets behind the peaks and turns the sky into a sea of fire. I reach the top of the tower and look out over the wilderness. I take a photo of the horizon and save it to my phone. It is the first day of my actual life. I realize the trust fund is gone, but the debt is paid. I am the only one standing on solid ground. My phone buzzes with a new notification. It is the lawyer. He is ready. The lawyer's voice is a steady drumbeat against the howling Montana wind. He reviews the documents Leo left behind and confirms the theft of my grandmother's trust. Harold and my mother did not just borrow the money, they liquidated the entire account through forged signatures. The betrayal feels like a second fracture in a bone that never set. I stand in the mud of the staging yard and authorize a civil suit for the full amount. This is not about the cash anymore. It is about the complete public record of their crimes. Valdez watches me from the office trailer with a look of silent understanding. He knows that I am fighting a war while I climb his towers. He hands me a work order for a remote site near the Canadian border. It is a high-altitude job that pays double the standard rate. I need the money to fund the legal fees that are piling up. I pack my gear into the Silverado and prepare for the long drive north. My hands are steady, but my mind is a cold machine. The drive is a blur of gray asphalt and white peaks. I reach the new site and find a skeleton crew waiting for me. The primary obstacle is a massive ice storm rolling in from the north. We have 48 hours to finish the antenna array before the site becomes inaccessible. I hook into the ladder and start the ascent into the freezing fog. My lungs burn with every breath of the thin air. I am working to outrun the memories of the beige house. I need to reach the top. The ice starts to form on the steel rungs as I reach the 300-foot mark. My gloves struggle to find a grip on the frozen metal. I hear a metallic snap and feel the tower shudder beneath my weight. A support cable is vibrating with a dangerous frequency. I realize the structure has not been inspected in years. It is a death trap dressed in utility paint. I look down at the tiny lights of the staging yard. I am alone in the clouds with a failing machine. I transition to the backup safety lanyard and slowly work my way toward the vibrating cable. I find a hairline fracture in the mounting bracket that holds the tension. If it snaps, the entire upper section will twist and collapse into the valley. I call Valdez on the radio and describe the situation. He tells me to descend immediately and leave the gear behind. I look at the antenna that represents my paycheck and my legal defense. I decide to stay and fix the bracket with a temporary weld. The portable welder is heavy and awkward in the high wind. I strike an arc and the blue light illuminates the swirling snow. I am focused on the bead of molten metal that will hold my world together. The cable groans, but the bracket holds steady as the weld cools. I feel a strange sense of power in this moment of extreme danger. I am fixing things that other men would simply abandon. I am not like Leo or my father. I am a builder of steel and truth. I finish the repair just as the wind speed doubles. The descent is a brutal crawl through a blinding whiteout. My boots hit the ground and I collapse into the snow for a moment. Valdez is there to pull me to my feet. He says the company will pay a massive bonus for saving the tower. I check my phone and see a notification from the bank. The first freeze has been placed on my parents' remaining assets. The civil suit is moving faster than I ever expected. It is working. A week later, I am sitting in a small diner in a border town. My phone rings with a call from my aunt in Nebraska. She tells me that Harold has been served with the lawsuit papers. He is claiming that the money was a gift for Leo's education. She says, "My mother is hysterical and accusing me of elder abuse." I tell her to check the signatures on the bank documents. My aunt goes quiet as the truth finally sinks in. She realizes she is defending the wrong nephew. The mid-scene turn happens when my aunt reveals a secret Harold kept for decades. He never actually owned the family house outright. He had been using my grandmother's trust as collateral for a private loan that is now in default. The bank is moving to seize the property regardless of the foreclosure status. My lawsuit is now a race against the institutional lenders. I realize my parents were never successful. They were just professional parasites. I feel a deep sense of disgust for the legacy I once admired. I drive back to the motel and find a man waiting by my door. He is a process server with a thick envelope from a different firm. My brother is suing me for emotional distress and lost wages from his finance career. He claims my report to the police was a malicious act of slander. I laugh as I read the desperate legal jargon. He is trying to use the law as a weapon of revenge. It is a pathetic attempt to regain the upper hand. I call my lawyer. My attorney says we will countersue for malicious prosecution and the costs of my initial defense. He is confident that Leo's criminal record will make his civil case impossible to win. We are going to bury them in a mountain of paperwork and legal fees. They wanted to play games with my life in a plastic cup. Now they have to play in a courtroom where the truth actually matters. I am prepared to spend every dime I have to finish this. The winter is just starting. The next morning I receive a text from an unknown number that belongs to Leo's former fiancée. She wants to know if I have any evidence of Leo's other dealings. She claims he stole several heirloom jewelry pieces from her jewelry box to cover his debts before the arrest, and she wants to file formal charges. I realize my brother's life is unraveling in every possible direction. He is a black hole of bad decisions and broken promises. I send her the contact information for my private investigator. I am helping her finish what I started. I stand on the balcony of my motel and watch the snow fall over the mountains. I have a clean job, a massive bonus, and a legal team that is winning. My family is a memory that is fading into the cold northern air. I am not the spare son or the blue-collar mistake anymore. I am the architect of my own justice. My phone buzzes with a final message for the night. The court date is set for the middle of January. I am ready to face them. The January court date arrives with a sky the color of a fresh bruise. I fly back to Nebraska and rent a modest car that smells of stale tobacco. My attorney meets me on the courthouse steps with a thick leather briefcase. He tells me, but Harold tried to file for bankruptcy to stall our civil suit. The judge denied the motion because of the pending fraud allegations regarding the trust fund. We walk through the metal detectors in total silence. I feel the weight of every lie they ever told me. Inside the courtroom, the air is stale and smells of old paper and desperation. My parents sit at the defense table, looking like fragile shadows of their former selves. Harold's suit hangs loose on his frame, as if he is shrinking by the minute. My mother avoids my gaze by staring at a scratch on the wooden table. Leo sits behind them in a cheap blazer that fits poorly at the shoulders. He looks like a man waiting for a blow that he knows he cannot dodge. I sit down. The primary obstacle emerges when the defense presents a series of handwritten notes. Harold claims these documents prove the trust money was an early inheritance authorized by my grandmother. My attorney leans in and whispers that the ink on the paper is suspiciously fresh. We request an immediate forensic audit of the stationery and the handwriting. The judge grants the motion, and the room turns icy with a new tension. Harold wipes sweat from his upper lip with a shaking hand. He knows the game is almost over. Slept. The mid-scene turn happens during my mother's forced testimony under the harsh fluorescent lights. She begins to cry and admits that Harold forced her to sign the forged trust documents. Slept. She claims she was afraid of his temper and the looming shadow of their massive debt. Harold stands up and shouts a curse before the bailiff forces him back down. The power balance shatters as the family unit turns on itself in public. I watch the collapse with a strange sense of clinical detachment. They are finally eating their own. My attorney pivots to the emotional distress counterclaim filed by my brother earlier this month. He presents the records from the private investigator regarding the stolen jewelry from Leo's former fiancée. The judge's expression hardens as the pattern of theft and deception becomes a mountain of evidence. Leo tries to speak, but his own lawyer pulls him back into his seat. The successful son is now a documented thief in the eyes of the state. It is a total slaughter of their false reputation. The room feels very small. The judge delivers a preliminary ruling that freezes every remaining cent in Harold's accounts. Slept. He orders a full restitution of the $50,000 plus legal fees and interest. My parents realize will leave this building with nothing but the clothes on their backs. My mother begins to wail, a sound that echoes off the marble walls. I do not look at her or offer a tissue. I simply check my watch and wait for the final signatures. The justice I sought is finally written in black ink. We exit the courtroom and find the hallway crowded with local reporters and curious strangers. My brother tries to block my path and begs for a private word in the corner. He says he has information about another stash of money Harold hid in an offshore account. He wants to trade the secret for a place to stay tonight. I look at him and see the same leech I saw in the mountains. I tell him to talk to the prosecutor. I walk past him without stopping my stride. I return to the rental car and sit in the driver's seat for a long time. The adrenaline fades and leaves behind a hollow ache in my chest. I have won the money and the moral ground, but I am still alone. I think about the Montana towers and the clean air of the northern peaks. I realize that Nebraska has nothing left for me but ghosts and bitter memories. I drive toward the airport to return to the life I built for myself. The sun is setting. A new complication arrives in the form of a phone call from the local sheriff's department. They tell me that Harold has disappeared from the courthouse parking lot following the judge's ruling. They found his Lexus abandoned near the river with the keys still in the ignition. My mother is at the station claiming that he left a note for me. I feel a sudden surge of cold dread in my stomach. I do not want his last words or his final drama. I want him gone. I drive to the sheriff's office and find my mother sitting on a plastic chair. She hands me a crumpled piece of yellow legal pad paper with shaking fingers. The note says that I am the reason the family is destroyed and broken. He blames my selfishness for his decision to walk into the dark water. I read the words and feel a wave of hot anger. Even in his final act, he is trying to frame me for his own failure. He is a coward. The search teams head out into the frozen night with flashlights and tracking dogs. I stand by the river and watch the beams of light dance over the ice. I realize that I do not care if they find him or not. His life was a series of lies, and my absence is his only truth. My mother begs me to stay and help with the search party. I tell her that I have a flight to catch in 2 hours. I am finished with his stories and her tears. I reach the airport and board the plane as the first snow begins to fall. I look out the window at the lights of the city receding below the wing. I think about the check I wrote for $1 and the truth I found. I am the only one who survived the wreck of the beige house. I close my eyes and try to sleep, but the words of the note haunt me. He wanted one last frame. He wanted me to carry his ghost into the high mountains. The plane lands in Montana, and I see Valdez waiting for me at the gate. He says the border job is finished, and a new contract is open in Alaska. I look at the rugged landscape and feel the strength returning to my hands. I tell him I will take the job, if the pay is right. He smiles and hands me a fresh cup of coffee. I realize that my career is my only true family. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. A message from a ghost. It says he is still alive and has crossed the state line. The text on my screen feels like a physical burn. Harold is alive and hiding in a cheap motel near the state line. He wants money to vanish forever. I delete the message and look at the Alaska contract in my hand. My objective is simple now. I must finish the legal paperwork to secure the restitution before they disappear. I am done being their victim. The wind howls outside the airport glass. I feel cold. I meet my lawyer one last time in a quiet terminal lounge. He hands me the final judgment papers for the trust fund theft. The court has authorized the seizure of Harold's hidden offshore accounts. This news changes everything for my mother and Leo. They thought Harold was their only hope for a future. Now they will find out he was stealing from them too. I sign the documents with a steady hand. The ink is dark and final. My mother calls while I am boarding the bush plane for the north. She is screaming about the frozen accounts and the missing money. She realizes that Harold left her with nothing but his debts. I tell her that family loyalty was a lie she sold to me. Now she can buy it back with her own tears. I hang up before she can beg. The pilot signals for me to take my seat. I am moving toward the ice. The plane touches down on a gravel strip in the Alaskan wilderness. I see the massive steel tower rising through the morning mist. It is the tallest structure I have ever faced. My new crew is tough and silent. They do not know about my brother or the beige house. They only care if I can climb in a storm. I hook my harness to the first rail. This is my true home. The air is perfectly clean. Halfway up the tower, I stop to check my equipment. I see a small engraving on the spare carabiner. I keep on my harness. It is Leo's initials from the summer We shared a room years ago. He must have touched my gear when he was planning the drugs. I realized he was never just a bystander. He was the architect of the entire frame. My father was just the hammer he used to strike me. I unbuckle the belt and let it fall. It vanishes into the white. I reach the summit and install the final antenna array. The world below is a sea of jagged ice and frozen rivers. I take a deep breath and feel my lungs expand. The lie that I needed their love is finally dead. I am the man who built his own mountain. I look at the horizon and see the sun through the clouds. My phone vibrates with a final alert. The bank has completed the transfer. The $50,000 from the trust restitution, plus the interest and legal fees awarded by the judge, is back in my account. I have reclaimed every cent they stole. I have won every battle, but the war has left scars. I send $10,000 to my aunt as a gift for her honesty. She is the only one who deserves a dime. I block the last remaining numbers from the Nebraska area code. I am a stranger to that life now. I look at the steel beneath my boots. It is solid and real. I am finally safe. I begin the long descent as the first stars appear. My radio crackles with Valdez's voice. He tells me the job is perfect, and the bonus is confirmed. I look down at the tiny lights of the camp. I think about the $1 check I smoothed out. It is a reminder of what they are worth. I am not a spare son anymore. I am the only one who climbed out. The ground is waiting for me,